So, hello, my name is Alex Bondarenko. I'm chief editor of LiRoom magazine, its media about Ukrainian music in Ukraine. And welcome to the next panel of the International Music Forum Selector PRO 2022. And today we will speak about the sound of local global connectivity. This forum is brought to you by British Council Ukraine and Music Expert Ukraine. It aims to strengthen connections between people, musicians, music professionals from all over the world. And today we sit down with Jon Dunn and Giorgi Kikonishvili, right? So Jon is music promoter. He's from the UK. He's done music events, festivals, all the stuff from Used to Radiohead to Glass Animals Today for, as far as I understand, more than 20 years for all number of people coming on his gigs. And now he's a co-founder and the head of Parallel Lines promotion agency. And also Giorgi, he is from Georgia, and he is one of the organizers of Bassiani nightclub and also Horoom nights, the queer party. And also he is a rights activist and one of the most prominent persons in Georgian club sphere and music scene, and also music critic as far as I read in his LinkedIn profile. Today we will speak about the local bands and their role in global community, in their local communities. And the first question is not about this. The first question is, how did you survive last 2 years? Because it was horrific for the industry as far as I read in all the articles. So let me start from maybe Jon, because you're from the UK, and UK is like a capital of music industry.
It's a good question. Looking back, I'm not really sure how we did, but I think everyone feels that same kind of feeling, and that they did seem to get through, you know, whether it was a venue, a manager, an artist or an agent. We had to downscale, of course, in terms of some of our staff, in terms of when the pandemic came in, we took, at the very beginning, we took a very forthright decision to be very, very active across socials and marketing and to keep pushing the artists. And of course, we were all talking about streaming and, you know, live shows in terms of streaming those. And then it got to a situation that the virus had gone on for, you know, more than 3 or 4 months, and it felt quite wrong to keep pushing artists when we were in a worldwide crisis. So we had to kind of downscale and relax a little bit off the socials and off the marketing, and just kind of fall in line with how the world was feeling at that time, I think. Consequently, we kept working in terms of talking to our artists, in terms of moving dates, keeping tickets rather than cancelling shows, keeping tickets active in the marketplace by rescheduling. It was very good to see that we didn't get so many refunds in the UK. People were very happy to just have their tickets kind of moved to a new date. You know, not just once, twice, 3 times even, and we're not getting the refunds. So it was difficult. We downscaled and we just about made it through, I think, with the help of some ticketing companies and just being a little bit more clever around our spends and you know, working from home and travel and all of those things.
So help was from inside the market, not from the government and stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, UK was actually really, really quite good. I feel. There was a big campaign. They had a lot of money, and generally, whenever the government helps music in this country, it tends to go to classical. It tends to go. They don't really factor in as like punk rock being a music of any level, and so everything tends to go to the Royal Albert Hall or the classical markets. But I was really, really pleased. You know, everyone from the guy on the street who's just got three acts and some artists, and everyone got a chance to pitch, and they made it as simple as possible to be able to pitch. They gave you good deadlines, and the money was actually put across a lot of industries. It wasn't a situation where one company took a whole bulk of the money. It was spread very, very well, I thought.
Thanks, Giorgi. And what about you? How did you survive these 2 years?
Well, it's been really hard, actually, just as like anywhere in the world, of course. But the thing is that the clubs were first from the very beginning of the pandemic. We decided by ourselves to close the clubs because of the safety reasons. But then after this came the lockdowns and everything, like the clubs, concert halls, the galleries, and everything else was shut down. So we realized that we would need a very much and a very long time to survive. And we, from the beginning, we started with crowdfunding. We became part of the United We Stream project, which is a Berlin-based project, and we united to the network of the clubs in Europe, and we became part of this international crowdfunding. And from the very first steps, it was kind of helpful, but of course, this would not be enough to survive for several months or years, especially considering that it's not only about clubs, it's also the festivals, the concert halls, and everything else. So we decided to create our own plan, and we founded the Association of the cultural industries, and we started working on a plan how to survive. And we get to know to the international kind of survival plans, and started adjusting it to our local needs. And finally, we came up with this plan, which we presented to the government. And after several months of negotiations and pushings and explaining the importance of the club culture to them, and finally they recognize that club culture is a culture. Then they finally decided to fund us, and so they opened up quite a huge amount of money for the clubs and festivals and bars and communities and collectives who were trying to survive. So it was half by the help of the crowd and people, and half by the help of the government. This is how we managed to survive.
Cool. And how many money did you get on your crowdfunding platform with Berlin clubs and stuff like this?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but these numbers wasn't quite high. It was enough to keep the artists and DJs and musicians to pay some salaries to them for, I think, 3 months, and that was it.
How many people have you got in your team?
At Bassiani, I think it's like 80 people in general, including the whole staff and founders, and the whole collective is something like 80 or maybe 100 people.
I see. And John, how many people do you have?
We only had really 5 people, but of course we kind of, when we have shows on, we have reps and crew and all of those people. So in terms of in-house, it was only really 5 people, but we tend to do a lot of stuff ourselves and hands-on really.
Okay. Speaking about artists, as far as you see in your country, because I guess that the experience in every country will be a little bit different. How do they survive this time? How do they survive without concerts, without live venues? John, first of all, you.
It's a tough question, I think. I think it depends on obviously their own circumstance, and I don't really know in general how they got through. I think a lot of people had to. I think probably looking a bit further back than that, a lot of artists were already finding it very difficult to survive, and hence have secondary jobs or other things that they're doing to even be able to work in the first place pre-virus. So I think it would have been really, really tough for them to get through. Obviously streaming didn't bring in so much money for them, the live streams, I don't think, unless they were an artist of a real level. So I think it's very difficult. I think what we have seen is, I'm sure we'll talk about, is that the amount of acts that have come out of the other end, and actually the buoyancy in the market now that has come out from it.
See, because in Ukraine, it seems like people in America or in the UK, they earn a lot of money and they can be artists even in the pandemic times, and it's not a problem for them.
I think, yeah, I can understand why that would be seen because just because of the pound and the dollar and etc. It's London is, you know, if I think it's a two-part question. People outside of London possibly a little bit easier because rent and rent is and the cost of living is a little bit lower. But in London, it's so expensive to live and to rent, and so it's all relative to their situation, really.
Mm-hmm. And what about Georgia?
Well, we have been using the various waves of survival because besides this crowdfunding, besides this government help, I think that the main thing was that we're already used to it since the 90s, I think, which has been one of the worst period of our lives and of our times. So we got used to help each other during the crisis. So what actually worked most was that all of us united, and we were sharing every kind of resources which we had, the intellectual or financial or physical or any kind of resources which we had. We were sharing with each other to make everyone feel better and to help each other to survive. And I think that besides this governmental help and the crowdfunding and all this stuff, this was the main thing which helped us to survive. Of course, some artists unfortunately had to start selling their instruments. Some artists moved to another field to work and to make living. But I think right now everything is more or less is being normalized again, and these artists are coming back to where belong.
Just to add to that, Georgia, it's like it's one thing that happened here was there's 13 major promoters in London who all do shows at a certain level, and it's very competitive, and there's a lot of history between certain people, and they don't talk to each other. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, the first time I've ever known it happen, is that we all met up on Zoom, all 13 promoters, 13 companies, so 20 odd promoters, 25 odd promoters, and we all had open discussions around how were we going to talk to the government, what could we do to help the venues, how were we going to help the artists, how were we kind of maybe even working together with staff together to make sure they can continue to have jobs. It was a period which we've never ever had before, and don't get me wrong, as soon as we went back, all those rivalries and all the problems began again. But for a brief moment in time, it was real unity, really was unity. And just one other thing you said that really, really hit home for me. London is a very expensive place to live, and we do have a lot of people from overseas and in artists here from overseas. And yes, they left London and returned to their homes overseas as well. Same kind of thing.
Also, speaking about Georgia, I was reading a lot about Bassiani and your parties, and it seems very interesting for me because Kiev is often called New Berlin, and also often reading about your parties, Tbilisi is called the New Berlin. What do you think about this connotation at all about New Berlin? And also, how does your club and your parties and your activism and your queer activism affect the image of Georgia in the world right now?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I heard this label Tbilisi as a New Berlin for quite many times, and sincerely, I'm not a big fan of this label because I think that there can't be any New Berlin or new something like Tbilisi. What it is now, it's a new Tbilisi, and it's a new life of Tbilisi with its own unique history, its own unique culture, its own face, and Kiev also. I have not been to Kiev yet, but I have heard lots of great stories about the nightlife in Kiev, the Closer, Kilovskaya, and so many other clubs. And of course, I would love to go to Kiev as soon as possible. But I'm pretty sure that Kiev also is not New Berlin. It's a new life of Kiev. Maybe I don't know, but I think it was all a media thing, because media usually allows the very catchy or simple comparisons, which make it easier for the readers to describe something. But no, I don't think that Tbilisi is a new Berlin. It's a new Tbilisi. So as for the queer activism, as for the Horoom parties, it's a very controversial thing here in Georgia, because at the same time, Georgian society is quite conservative. You might have already watched the programs which happened in Tbilisi during the Pride for several times, and until now, it's still impossible to organize a Pride parade or such things publicly. But at the same time, the underground culture, and in underground, I mean that this underground culture it's almost already a mainstream, because the clubs are very popular. Techno music became super popular here, and so the number of people who go to the clubs and who are part of the queer parties and who are part of this club culture, which is based on solidarity and unity and equality, the number of these people are quite huge, especially in the younger generation. So the Horoom Nights, which started like 5 years ago, I think, which was the first and biggest queer party series in Georgia, I think that it changed the entire culture of the city. And in culture, I mean the way how people communicate with each other, the attitude of the people with each other. So it's changed the whole generation. We have like thousands of people registered on the party, and each party we have thousands of people attending the night. So, and it changed on not only the local culture, but also, of course, it became quite popular on an international level, especially in our neighborhood, because in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, I know that a lot of people come to Horoom Nights, even from Ukraine, Turkey, from the neighboring countries. So whenever you know that such a thing is happening in your neighboring country, especially when you're representing a very conservative society, of course, you go to this country and you do your best to become part of it. Just like as I want to go to Kiev, to go to other cities, to kind of share this moment and emotions which is happening in this city. So it's quite thrilling to know that people who come to Tbilisi, for example, from Armenia and Azerbaijan, people who were dancing in the Tbilisi clubs every weekend, then they went back to their cities in Yerevan and Baku, and then they started their own techno clubs and they started their own queer parties. So it's influencing, at least on a neighboring level, quite important changes.
Mm-hmm. So this is the influence of local and global community, but it still remains secret place, right? So you don't reveal the place where you play these parties.
You mean the Horoom Nights?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not secret. It happens at Bassiani, which is Venice's biggest and main national stadium of Tbilisi. So we're under the football field. It's quite symbolic.
Okay, and also, Jon, I wanted to ask you, UK is well known as an exporter of music, not the importer of music. But for example, Ukraine and other big countries are not like this. So I wanted to ask you, is foreign music even popular in Ukraine? Do UK people want to listen to some musicians, artists from abroad?
I would say so. In the market I work in is quite a left field kind of market. I think very much so. I think everything's changing, has been changing, and is rapidly changing. I mean, the first, even as far back as the 90s and the early 2000s, it was all kind of English acts or American acts. But then, things changed. Like from Scandinavia, bands like the Cardigans started to do well in the UK, and then you look at kind of, Tame Impala suddenly it's like it just manifested itself as we started to move along with the internet. And I think, very much so. I mean, I look after a girl called Kedra Levinsky, who's from Russia, and most of the roster that we have is international, and that doesn't mean to say that it's just America, you know, or Scandinavia. It's everywhere. I mean, the Spanish market right now in the UK with Rosalia, the band Heinz, that's generated so much. I mean, the African market in the UK now with Thames from Nigeria is huge, starting to break in the UK. It's everywhere. I think we still are in that place where it is quite UK centric, but I think with every single year that we move forward, that percentage reduces. You know, I think we fast forward 10 years, you'll probably find it be very, very equal in terms of overseas acts. But also at the same time, that London is a crazy hotbed for musicians. You know, people almost come to London to form bands. You know, it's you know, I live in the East End of London, and you know, you can't move for people carrying guitars. You go in a cafe and there's people with guitars and drum cases. You know, everyone seems to be in a band. So it's very buoyant too from the UK perspective.
And if you're looking for new markets, what are you looking at? I mean, number of streamers, number of people living in this country, I don't know, money capacity. What are you looking at, first of all?
And maybe I'm a little bit more old school, but I don't look at streams. I don't look at any of those figures. I just find that they just get in the way of the music. Like I like to see the aesthetic of the artist, but it's all about the music. It has to kind of mean something and feel something and give off something. I think also the streams are so misleading. You know, we have acts that can sell 100 tickets, but can do, you know, like 500,000 streams. You know, it's kind of none of it matches up. So it's dangerous to go down that road. I think what I'm looking for is just music first and foremost. And an aesthetic. It has to mean something, has to have some integrity, if that makes sense.
For you as a promoter, both of you, Giorgi and Jon, is it interesting to make events abroad in other countries? And what's the reason for it, Giorgi?
You know, it depends. It depends. For me as a promoter, I prefer to stay here and to do my own things here. And I have not thought of like bringing something abroad.
Jon, and what about you? Did you make gigs abroad?
I mean, it's always been something I've wanted to do, to be honest, but it's more difficult than I ever imagined. And I think that we're very blessed, and I'm very lucky to be, you know, to put shows on in London. It's a big market. It's very open towards, you know, being able to put shows on and make them work. But I've tried looking at a few things, particularly in Spain, and you know, the VAT rates are different, the tax rates are different. It's a different way of doing things. You know, artists that, you know, when they play in London, we don't pay for hotels, but in other cities you're expected to pay for the hotels and maybe some money towards the flights. And every market is so very, very different. So I think the practicalities of it is really difficult, but also the biggest problem is that, you know, what one artist is worth in terms of tickets in one market is so very different to another market. So it's very easy to get caught out. I love the idea of club culture coming into different markets, because I think it brings a different energy rather than just a promoted show by an artist. You know, the idea of a club culture coming into a different city from another city, I think that's great. I think there's an edginess to that, and they bring their own influences to the party. And I think that's something of, you know, of real value.
Mm-hmm. Due to the pandemic, speaking about festivals and gigs, I saw that almost in every country, all the festivals that took place, not a lot of them due to obvious reasons, but they had almost fully local lineup with bands, because they can't come from abroad, so they bring local guys. Such was in Ukraine. And how do you think, will this trend stick? Will people use more local bands in the future, or international bands are preferably better for the festivals and gigs?
Yeah, a lot of the festivals, you know, the Green Man and End of the Road festivals in the UK last year were very UK based, because they They were in July and August, so at the time when we were opening up again. So it was a lot of UK acts, which is fantastic. I think it is, it gives a stage to a lot of acts that maybe wouldn't have got a stage before. The crowds were so enthusiastic to go to a festival for the first time in 2 years. It was brilliant, but I don't know how much of it will stick long term. I think there is always a desire to see international acts, and I think festival bookers will always proceed to look at things on a quality level in terms of having the act that they want the most, rather than an act being they're a local act, let's put them on the bill because they're local. But certainly it paid dividends for a lot of bands UK based last year, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Giorgi, speaking about Georgia, same question, but with some shift, because in Ukraine, for example, there is a problem to sell a festival without international gigs, because we have not so many local artists who could bring thousands of people on the gig. What about Georgia?
I think that it's considering especially if you're speaking about the club culture or general the electronic music culture, which is quite which becomes more and more popular here. And it started from the 90s. I think that the local artists already who are also becoming more and more popular on an international level, and they're playing on biggest festivals and clubs abroad. The local scene is already getting enough appreciation from the local crowds that you can make a festival and you can make a huge club night with local artists only, and you can have a sold out. They're much beloved artists, and they already have this much needed experience to make a proper party, a proper night, to play proper music. With the technical quality and everything else. And I think the clubs in Tbilisi were opened some 3 weeks ago. And since then, most of the lineup is local. Of course, there are some international artists as well. Like we are having hair and sauna night. Then on the next weekend, and some our beloved and very popular international collectives and DJs are also playing. But yeah, you can make a night with only local residents, and you can have a sellout.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And speaking about music, I was asking you this question before we started this conversation, but it's really interesting for me. Do you need to have some folk colorite in your music, some maybe national themes to become popular worldwide for a Georgian musician, for example? Because almost all Ukrainian musicians popular worldwide, they have something national, something traditional in their music.
I don't know. It's really hard to No, because actually the Georgian musicians who are right now most popular abroad, if you could start with Kati Melua, for example, who is a Georgian British musician, and if you take some of the names from Georgia who are becoming more and more popular and on an international level, they don't have this kind of Georgian folklore or this kind of traditional influences on them, on their music, but they do have the current local kind of language and style and influences on them, which makes them quite special. Actually, most of the names who are becoming internationally acclaimed right now from Georgia are the artists who sing in Georgian, because it was already a very long tradition in Georgia to speak to sing in English, because most of the musicians who were starting here, they of course wanted to become popular abroad, so they started their music in English. But for years passed, and now you see that it doesn't work as much as it like singing in Georgian and bringing your unique, current, contemporary, the very distinctive style. This is what works more, I think.
And John, as you as a promoter, when you're looking for bands, are you looking for some traditional elements in their music when you're looking for some band, I don't know, from Africa or from Eastern Europe or somewhere else?
No, I'm really not. You know, I'm not even, it doesn't even come onto my kind of thought space at all, really. Again, it comes back down to the music, but it does bring to mind, just hearing Giorgi talking there, things like Gogol Bordello, who broke, you know, I used to look after them back in 2007 or whatever, and they broke really big here. You know, we ended up selling 5,000 tickets in London for that band, and Start Wearing Purple was like a huge song here. And, you know, if I think back to things like that, I mean, it had nothing to do with any traditions of what they were doing. It was just all about, they're amazing live. It's different to what I've heard before. It's captivating. So no, I'm never looking for that. And in many ways, also, I think that the way we find acts and the way that they come across our radar, we don't even know what country they're from a lot of the time. You know, quite often, you know, it's not until you've got much further down the road with hearing some tracks or seeing something that you really even know, you know, to an extent where they're from. So it doesn't really come onto our to my headspace, certainly.
Speaking about the behavior of audience, there were concerns that people will be afraid to go to concerts after pandemic, that some pandemic, you know, rules will make them, I don't know, not so comfortable in the concerts. Do you see this, or it's not true, John?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely saw it when we came back in September. You could almost split the audience, those people over 30 and those people under 30. And we came back, and our first shows with a demographic of people 18 to 30 were absolutely insane. You know, the crowds were more vocal than I've ever heard them from. The shows had so much energy. Tickets were flying out. On the flip side of that, anything really targeted at 30, 35 and older, those tickets were slow. And I think the only reason for that is, you know, if you're 35, maybe you have parents who are in their 60s and 70s. You may have children. Maybe, you know, if you're 18 to 30, maybe you're not quite in that area. So there was a definite split between the two. We could see one demographic selling really, really well, and the other demographic very, very slow to return to the market.
I see, Giorgi. What about club life?
I think that the energy which was accumulated during these 2 years is bursting out right now in the clubs, in the concert halls, everywhere else. Like, the energy is even higher than it was before. So I think it's quite natural, because no matter what, the physical interaction, the physical communication with a musician or with the music, this live experience, the party experience is it can't be replaced by the digital streams or the digital thing so easily, at least. And I think that it just can't be replaced. So the energy is even higher than it was before the pandemic right now. And I think it's very natural. We are striving for it.
Maybe that's why Live Nation stocks are going up every day. So, and also the question, maybe some philosophical one, but how do you think, does pandemic make countries closer one to another, or the isolation from inside the countries make it much more far from one another? Because we're talking about since you're talking about your connection with Berlin guys, with other countries, but from my perspective, it seems that people become more steady in their places. They don't want to go anywhere. They're afraid of it, and people don't want to collaborate with other countries. How do you think?
We're always open to collaborations, of course. So yeah, I don't see that anything has changed radically for us in London, particularly.
Giorgi?
Well, from my perspective, which I see now and which I experienced and we have experienced in the last years, is that we got even closer to the collectives and to the people who we are already working with internationally, like in Berlin, Amsterdam, Vienna, Brussels, and also in different cities. I think that the isolation it showed us what's the more important thing of life or work or everything else. So, okay, like it's like we spent these years in an isolation, but maybe there are some people who prefer who prefer to stay isolated. I don't know, but generally, what I think and what I see is that people are missing this interaction and collaboration and cooperation and seeing and meeting each other and having fun together and everything else. So I think that since the borders are opened, people will maybe even appreciate this even more than before.
Okay, maybe I see that we're
personally for me it's like this.
Cool. And we're running out of time, and I have last questions for you. Jon, can you name 3 music acts you would like to recommend right now from your radar?
Oh, wow. I guess
Giorgi, you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
You mean from local scene?
Yeah, I guess local. For you, local, and for Jon, I guess it will be worldwide because you're working with artists from all over the world.
I think just off the top of my head, I'm just thinking of what I've listened to this morning. There's an artist called Yeule, which is Yeule from Singapore, which is very much in the same kind of ballpark as Sega Bodega, Caroline Polachek, Shy Girl, Charlie XCX. Fantastic artist. And I say artist, proper artist. What else did I be listening to this morning? A girl called Erica de Cassier, who is from Norway. There you go. There's a really good. I'm not sure if it's Norway or Denmark. I think it's Norway. Signed to 4AD Records, which is like a seminal record label here, and of course, maybe on a slightly bigger level. Actually, there's a great band here called WH Lung, who are from Manchester. And, all the great bands that have come out from Manchester, if you think around New Order and the Smiths and kind of Joy Division, it's got that same, they're just kids, but they somehow have all these Manchester influences. But it's quite proggy and clubby as well. They could almost play on a club night. And actually have people dancing with their back to them, but they are vocals as well. So there are probably 3 things that I've been listening to this morning, but there's a lot more as well. There's always stuff, always.
Thanks. Giorgi, what about you?
I was thinking about the Georgian local artists, and there are some which I would really, I would love to see them like making it big. The first one is Echo and Windafolio, who are the post-punk duo. And what I love in them most is that they created this very, very Georgian, and in Georgian, I mean not the traditional or folk, but the current contemporary Georgian music language. And they create this kind of music, and they have written my all-time favorite love songs ever. The second one is Kaya Kata, which is a kind of experimental hip-hop duo. And they also had this very current, and they create their own language, actually, their own Georgian language, a kind of new language. And the third one would be Creams. This girl is creating a very, very, I like it. The synth pop, which creates, I think it's going to be also become quite popular.
Thanks a lot. It was Jon, it was Giorgi, it is British Council, Selector PRO 2022, Music Expert Ukraine. Thanks for listening to us. I hope we will meet again.
Thank you.
In real life too.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.